I'll save some of that for our interview.
Sure.
I think we're live now. It says
Great.
okay. And I'm going to introduce you properly here.
Good.
This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and I am Frank Schaeffer. And my guest today, but I shouldn't put it that way because
Mm.
today, Catherine, who is my guest, is interviewing me. So I ought to say Frank Schaeffer is the guest and Catherine Ruth Pakaluk is the host. Catherine is
Mhm.
the Director of Political Economy and Associate Professor at the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America. She is the author of Hannah's Children, The
Mhm.
Women Quietly Defying the Birth Dearth. Today, Catherine is interviewing me about my new project, The Gospel of Zip. And In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, if you might please subscribe right now on YouTube, where this is going live, and then will exist
Mhm.
forever until the whole interwebs are destroyed or destroy themselves. Um, and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, where my podcasts also exist. And please subscribe to my Substack. It has to be said page at substack.com. And you can also follow this new project we're talking about, The Gospel of Zip, at thegospelofzip.com. And before we get into you interviewing me, I just want to say this up front.
Yes.
Um, I quote your book in my new book, your book, Hannah's Children. And quite literally, I don't want to turn the camera because I'm bad with the tech stuff and then it won't ever be in the right thing again. But it's sitting here on my desk. I keep a couple books here I really love that I refer
Mhm.
to of people I've interviewed, and yours is one of them. And when I was working on the final pass of the Gospel of Zip, I thought about you all the time
Mm.
because your book about having kids um, really set up so much of my own. So I'm going to be very presumptuous here, and I want to read you something from my book. It's in short
Great.
sections. I'm going to read you
Mhm.
section 207 and 208.
Great.
The ideal social order we need to thrive includes a stable family, a safe and coherent neighborhood, a vibrant civic life, and a set of shared values that neighbors use to build healthy communities.
Mm.
Section 208. Catherine Pakaluk advocates for the process of learning childcare skills based on moral truths about family life that do
Mm.
not change. Pakaluk received her doctorate in economics from Harvard University and is an associate professor of social research and economic thought at the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
Pakaluk wrote a remarkable book about women who choose to have large families. Hannah's Children, The Women Quietly Defying the Birth Dearth. Pakaluk interviewed 55 college-educated women raising 5 or more children like herself and reported on their reasons for having large families. Then she turned these interviews into a book. When I read this passage, it reminded me of how Jeannie, that's my wife
Mm.
Jeannie that I've been with for
Mm.
56 years, and I had felt about wanting to have a fourth child, which by the way, we didn't have
Mm.
because Jeannie had to have a hysterectomy. But
Mm.
that's not in the book in this
Mm.
part, although we talk about it other
Right.
places. Quote, and now I'm quoting Catherine's book, and this is what she
Mm.
says. I suppose it boils down to some sort of deeply held thing,
Yeah.
possibly from childhood, a platinum conviction that the capacity to conceive children, to receive them into my arms, to take them home, to dwell with them in love, to sacrifice for them as they grow, and to delight in them as the Lord delights in us, that thing, call it motherhood, call it childbearing, that thing is the most worthwhile thing in the world, the most perfect thing I am capable of doing. So I open with that only
Mm.
because, this is sort of me promoting my book by getting you to interview
Mm.
me on it, but it's more than that. It's a way to close a circle of gratitude
Yeah.
because the self-confidence in your book, in terms of the choices you've made of being a mother of a
Mm.
large family and a university professor and so many other things, sort of holds up a model for me of what is
Mm.
possible. And I drew on that, on your strength in
Mm.
working on my book, The Gospel of It. So I just want to thank you before we start. And
Mm.
now it's over to you because you're interviewing
Okay.
me.
Well, thank you so much, Frank. At Appreciation Society, I was going to say, I think you might have been the first person I heard from when my book was first described in public. And so I think we've connected on this topic of childbearing, but also on
Yeah.
the purification of what it means to devote our lives to others.
Yeah.
since our first conversation. So I'm so thankful. And now I'm going to say I'm such a big fan of this project.
Thank you.
Really excited to be, the first person to interview you about your project,
Yeah.
The Gospel of Zip. There's so much to cover, and I don't know where to start.
Mm.
But I'm gonna just kind of pitch you the first question
Sure.
about why this is a gospel. Why is this a good news? And
Mm.
then if you want to kind of sneak in there something about how Zip came into your life, I mean, that would be the
Sure.
place to start. It's your leading title, and I love it so much. And so after you tell us about Zip, I'm going to tell you about a dog that came into my life, and we'll
Mm.
we'll go from there.
Well, the traditional idea of the gospel, of course, is in the New Testament
Mm,
and in the Christian Bible. But I'm not being facetious when I say the gospel of Zip, because like you, I'm
mm-hmm.
someone that believes in truth.
Yeah,
I may not always know what that truth is,
sure.
but I believe as the Christian Smith, who teaches at Notre Dame, puts in his book, Morally Believing Animals, he says,
Mm,
he doesn't know exactly what he believes, but he hopes that out there somewhere there
yeah,
is this story
yeah.
that is true. So, the Gospel of Zip basically boils down to one idea, and that is that it's never been for human evolution or canine evolution
Mm.
that turned little wolves into little dogs
Hmm.
about the survival of the fittest, the most vicious,
Yeah.
the strongest. It's always been the survival of the friendliest.
Mm,
So the Gospel of Zip really, and I'm not being facetious here, is literally mirrors the gospel itself in the New Testament, in the sense that the New Testament does not teach us to pay attention to the strongest, the most
yeah,
vicious, the most powerful. It tells us to look out for the least of these, which might be a
yeah.
newborn baby, or it
Mm,
might be a friend, or it might be a stranger on the street. Dogs do the same thing. When
yeah,
Zip walks down through my neighborhood, as I talk about in the book, he doesn't care if you have a Trump sign out or if you're a flaming liberal.
yeah,
What he cares about is that you're a human. He wants to relate to you. He's a dog. He's
yeah,
hoping maybe you drop a piece of food, but in any case, he's going to wag his tail and go up and
yeah,
lick your hand. So
yeah.
basically, the Gospel of Zip, to put it bluntly, is the gospel of the survival of
Mm,
the friendliest and the
mm,
way cooperation actually has better results than confrontation. And that's the
yeah,
gospel of Zep.
yeah.
It's the natural evolutionary order, which is
Right.
that cooperation is what works.
When in your life do you feel that you really began to see this truth about dogs and what it could reflect about us?
Yeah, I mean, the first little dog that I had that I connected with deeply, because I had a
Mm,
couple dogs before that as a young child, but it was very distracting because they were in the middle of my parental,
mm,
environment where they were running a
mm,
spiritual commune in Switzerland, and there was so much confusion there that the dogs, there were just too many people.
mm,
But
mm,
I had a little dog called Portly, named after Little Portly in Wind in the Willows, a character there in that book that we got in South Africa when I was directing two feature
mm,
films for Hollywood
mm,
producers in South Africa. And, um, Portly, we got this little puppy on a farm, and she was sort of a mix of Bichon Frise and Maltese, a little mutt. And she became so much a part of my life that I kind of had to question this human-centric view that I
mm,
came from my evangelical background, that somehow there's
mm,
this hierarchy in creation. Humans are very important. They're created in the image
mhm.
of God. If you run afoul of God, of course, he will burn you forever in hell, but that's a different subject. Nevertheless, you have this significant place.
Yeah.
And with Portly, I began to realize that, she had ingratiated herself into our family in a way that um, made me closer. I know this is an odd thing to say, to her,
Yeah.
to this little animal, to this
Yeah.
dog, than I was to many humans. So that was the
Mm,
first time I noticed there's
mm,
something more going on here in this relationship than
yeah.
simply a quote pet. She was not a
Yeah.
pet. She was a family member. And then there was an interval after she passed away after 13, 14 years with us. And then we got Zip. And then Zip sort of took it to another level because different
Mm,
dogs have different personalities, as you know.
yeah.
And Zip, who I have on the cover of the book here, that Zip, in his hero pose.
Yeah.
Zip, and I give an example in the book, but Zip had a number of intuitive responses to the
Mm,
people he was with, which sort of boggled my mind, other than
mm,
just basic friendliness and kindness and decency and love and all the things you expect from a great dog. As I mentioned in the book, I had polio when I was 2, and my left leg
Mm,
is atrophied. It's always
mm,
cold, and in the winter, I cannot get it warm.
mm,
And Zip sleeps in my bed, and he tucks himself down near my legs. And when he started discovering my cold leg, he would move over and warm it.
mm,
And Zip never goes anywhere cold. Zip always sits in a sunbeam or by our wood
yeah.
stove. Zip hates the cold, and I
Mm,
have no way of explaining it. I didn't move my leg closer to him.
mm,
And the only thing I can say is every time I've cut my hand, because I do a lot of masonry and building around our project, I've always got cuts and
yeah.
bandages on my hand somewhere.
Yeah.
Zip always tries to help me. So Zip will sniff and he knows there's been a little blood there or whatever. And he will begin to instinctively, like that passage in the New Testament where Jesus
Yeah.
says about Lazarus, sitting there at the rich man's gate, that, the dogs would lick his sores.
Right.
It's like that. Zip wants to help.
Yeah.
So um, there's that. And then the other thing is like Jeannie broke her foot the other day, stepped off a curb with my producer, Ernie Gregg, and who was visiting me, broke her foot and she's in a cast. Well, we all knew where Zip would be for the next 24 hours. It's sitting on
Yeah.
her bed.
Right.
He doesn't leave you when you're down. And that includes he doesn't, normally he'd want to go outside and pee and do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
If you're hurt, Zip's with you. If you're sick, Zip's with
Yeah.
you. So that's all I can say. He warms my
Yeah.
polio leg. And then the other
Yeah.
thing, which I mentioned in the book, which is a little less, a little more playful, is that when Jeannie and I have sex, we don't know why, but Zip goes off and sits in the kitchen and never comes into the room or scratches at the door. The rest of the time, Zip would
Mm,
insist on being there. But
mm,
how does he possibly know that you don't?
yeah.
So Zip has a
Mm,
level of sort of canine intuition that is above
yeah.
normal. This isn't regular. We haven't trained him. He trained us. He
Yeah.
knows shit. Excuse the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
But Zip is sort of remarkable that way. So that's all I
Yeah.
can say about Zip.
And why are you writing about Zip now? What are the things you're hoping to communicate, especially to young men?
Well, this is where the book gets very serious in
Yes.
terms of my own view. I got Jeannie pregnant when we were 17 and 18, and we have 3 kids and 5 grandchildren, and 3 of the youngest ones live across the street. And had she not had a hysterectomy a few years after everything went wrong after our 3rd child was born, because
Mm,
as you know, birth can be
yeah.
very risky, things
Yep.
happen, we
Yep.
would have definitely had a 4th child at least. We were certainly planning that. I mean, that was understood. We were going to have another child immediately after
Mm,
John was born and then Kun. So, my message is not just to young men, but to younger people in general. And that is, as
mm-hmm.
a 73-year-old looking back over
Yeah.
my life,
Yeah.
I'm not certain of a lot of things. Paradox plays a big part in my philosophy, my theology, my
Mm-hmm.
belief. But there's only one thing I'm absolutely sure of, and that is that the key relationships in my life, Jeannie,
Yeah.
my children, and my grandchildren, all my regrets related to them are always related to things where I could have done more at some point in my
Mm,
life and put them and loved them more and done
mm,
less other stuff. I have no regrets in terms of the time spent.
yeah.
So, as I look back, what I'm trying to share with younger people and young men in particular is that they have very bad models around them now.
Mm,
The
yeah.
extreme is Jeffrey Epstein and
Yeah.
his cohorts, but then more mundanely, it's the people that look at romantic relationships and love, falling in love, and so forth
Mm,
with this kind of jaundiced, cynical eye, as if somehow this is something you do much later in life, and
yeah.
you don't want to mess up your career or you want to stay independent. And I'm just saying, wow, it went very quickly. And the only thing I'm
Mm-hmm.
certain of is that I'm very fortunate
Yeah.
that my marriage with Jeannie, which I tell the story of in this book, not only worked out, but that it was fruitful, that it produced these
Mm,
children in this family. And my life revolves around
yeah.
them. And it doesn't revolve around being a writer
Yeah.
or things I've done. It revolves around this. And I'm trying to share that sense with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm going to switch quickly. One of the reasons I love this book so much, I mean, it's like I don't know where to start. Because and this isn't about me or my experience with dogs, but I just that valence of this book resonates with me so deeply. I think dogs are mysterious, wonderful creatures that are imbued with all kinds of, just capacities for connection that we don't fully appreciate and we will not probably ever unlock. So I love that part. But then it really, and this is what I think is fascinating about you as a writer. There's something about this book which is I like to think of it as like a distillation.
Mm.
So it's like you are telling the story of Frank becoming pure over your lifetime, and this kind of this process of distillation where you start with something that might have some impurities, and through this successive process of essentially sort of encountering stresses in life, you've become, as you tell it, a more pure, more heroic, maybe you start to look like Zip in that picture. Um, and now you're sort of here to tell us, what is the pure Frank like? So, what is Jeannie's role in this? We've got the picture of Zip, and this canine non-aggression gift of connectedness, which is the dogs.
Yeah.
Tell us about Jeannie. I'm
Well, of
struck
course,
with,
I do tell you about her in the book, as you know, because you
yes,
read it. And I have a
yes.
lot of times when I quote it. So the first thing I'll say is kind of an amusing thing for those people who don't know the book. Um, at the beginning of the book, I tell Jeannie I'm going to write it, and and she's always been my editor, as in she's always read, two or three drafts of each manuscript I've done, and always given me
Mm,
the best notes. And I don't say that because I'm married
yeah,
to her. I say
yeah,
that because I've worked with a lot of editors, and she's
yeah,
a good editor, but she understands me. So this
mm,
book, she says, well, I'm not reading it because
yeah.
part of this is our love story, and I lived it, and I've already had one heart attack, and I'm not reading it. It was tough enough to go
Yeah.
through and all the ups and downs, and I've done the mothering, and I've done the wife, and I've done the friend, and I'm still your wife, and I'm still your friend, but I'm not going to go through this again.
Mm,
And so she was only half joking. She didn't think it would give her a heart attack, but she really just didn't want to do it.
yeah.
As she put it several times, she says, I lived it. So the function of Jeannie for this book in the most specific sense, which I don't think is what you're asking, but I'll answer that first, is
Yeah.
that she did agree because she trusts me at this point of my life
Okay.
to represent her well. She says, but I will let you interview me for the book because I said, I want to ask you about the experience of being a
Mm,
mother and a wife and all these things you've learned because you have such
yeah.
wisdom. I want to share your wisdom in this book. Can I
Yeah.
interview you? And she let me.
Yeah.
So I transcribed those, and when I quote Jeannie in those, it's accurate because that's what she said, or I'm trying to remember conversations I had over dinner in Florence 30 years ago, and I'll
Hmm.
ask her, "Is that this is do you remember that?"
Yeah.
So I think I represent her accurately. So first of all, she contributed to the book. That if
Hmm.
you took a percentage of quotes of Jeannie, it would be a quarter of the book in terms
Yeah.
of my voice and her voice.
Yeah.
She's not just represented, she speaks in the
Mm.
pages. She won't read because she
Hmm.
already had one heart attack, as she puts it. But there's a much deeper quality to that. And I know this will sound a little bit mushy and maudlin, but I really mean it.
Hmm.
People often ask me, why did you change from this evangelical background and this kind of hard striving,
Yeah.
figure in this world? And I say, really, I did it for the love of Jeannie.
Mm.
And that goes for everything in this book. Why do I
Mm.
see Zip as a good person, if I can put it that way, clearly?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
his kindness, his
Mm.
forbearance, his forgiveness, his love reminds me of Jeannie. And I feel the same way when I look at things about, my
Yeah.
children or grandchildren I like best. What I like best is when they behave in a way that reminds me of her. Sensible, grounded, forgiving,
Mm.
kind, you know, very basically wise in so many
Mm.
ways. She's the person I look to. So for me to start out as a kind of a damaged product of a
Mm.
cult, living on a Swiss mountainside, dumped
Mm.
in British boarding schools, dyslexic, have a
Mm.
temper, anger issues, a tremendous ambition to get ahead at one point as my father's nepotistic sidekick in this evangelical world. Why did I travel from that?
Mm.
The beginning of each of those journeys was not theological or philosophical. It was really for love, in the sense
Mhm.
that, and I'm sorry that I use this language in the book,
Mm.
you know, I say I was groomed to be an asshole by divine right because I was given this
Mm.
patriarchal model that sort of enforced all my worst attributes
Yeah.
anyway. And the reason I gradually moved away from that, the reason I gradually became, more of a father and less of a tyrant, a
Mm.
grandfather that does as much childcare as she did, all these things was because I wanted to be the person that I thought Jeannie really deserved. And she
Mm,
wasn't pushing me saying, you're not the person I deserve or anything like that. She's
mm,
not like that at all.
yeah.
But you cannot be in the presence of somebody really good and really decent and balanced and kind and not start comparing yourself to them.
Yeah.
And I really fell short. Jeannie is
Mm,
a really fantastic person, and she was born that way, did not bring all the damaged aspects of her life to me. And basically, she was sort of like this good view out of a window
mm,
that you see when you go somewhere and you're saying, wow, I wish I lived somewhere
mm,
this beautiful.
mm,
And she really had that influence on me. So
mm,
she didn't say you've got to shape up and be different, although we would have huge fights and she did push back.
yeah.
But her effect on me is very similar to the effect that Zip has had in my life.
Yeah.
This is a reminder of the way I wish I was all the time. I'm not the way Zip is all the time, but he really is that way all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And he's always sweet. He's always friendly. He's always kind. He always, he
Yeah.
doesn't snap back. He just gives me a really hard look
Yeah.
to ask for something, but then doesn't bite me if he doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And Jeannie's very similar. So my parenting skills, such as they are as an old man who takes care of grandchildren now, developed because I watched the way she worked with our children.
Mm,
And when I would snap and yell and be angry, she would be kind and patient and forgiving. When I would lose my
mm,
bearings and sort of just be, really a destructive force in our household with shouting and temper, door slamming and all the rest, she would hold her fire and then talk about it afterwards when we were
mm,
together. And basically, she didn't then come say to me, okay, you should be the way I am. She just
mm,
was that way. And so, I feel that once in a while we are redeemed by the good fortune we have, whether it's something we read or someone we know, of having someone or some
mm,
person that we know or whatever in a book or wherever it may be set
mm.
an example. But when you live with someone, you know if that example is authentic or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Jeannie, like my dog Zip, is good to the bone. There is
Yeah.
no other version of her to emerge in some bad, desperate
Mm,
moment. So, um,
yeah.
my book, The Gospel of Zip, springs from observing my little dog. But my little dog's value to me is because his best attributes of the survival of the friendliest remind me of why I passionately love this woman I've been
Yeah.
with for 56 years, more than ever now. And I never expected that. If you had asked me when I was 20,
Yeah.
25, 30,
Yeah.
if you had said to me, you're not really going to be as in love as you think you are with Jeannie until you're
Yeah.
73 years old, then you will begin to understand what this word means. I would have
Mm,
looked at you as if you were, you know, coming from another planet. I wouldn't have
yeah.
known what you were talking about. But that's actually how it's turned out to be.
Amazing. Something you said just now about Zip struck me, and it's something that I've thought about in relation to my own work and hope to think a lot more about it, which is you said, well, you're taking, I think people think about dogs this way, they
Mm,
think about their pets this way, and to some extent they think about their children this way. It's a burden, it's something you take care of, it's something you are doing.
mm,
But what you just said is that Zip's value to you. You just used that language, his value
mm.
to you. And I take it you would say the same thing about your children and your grandchildren.
Yeah.
In a sense, you flipped the script a little bit there,
Mhm.
which is, sure, there's work or there's this or there's that, but then there's this world of how they change us and how they
Yeah.
make us better.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that. As I think we could call it the labor of caregiving in our
Yeah. Labor of
lives.
caregiving. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us more
Yeah,
about
and to
that.
me, it's the most redemptive part of life, period. But
Mm,
I'll
mm,
explain why. I think one of the things I've learned as I got older is this, and that is we live in a very utilitarian culture. What will
mm.
I get out of this?
Yeah.
Self-improvement, all these issues. It's
Yeah.
always what will I get out of this? Jobs, career, work, people we know, the kind of people at
Mm.
a Hollywood party who are always looking over your shoulder to see if there's someone more important standing behind you they should be talking to. They want to
Yeah.
get more out of this party than just talking to this,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
half-baked young director they're
Yeah.
meeting. They want to, maybe there's an important producer over there. So there's this
Hmm.
utilitarian urge to always capitalize, to get something out of it. And we have very mixed motives. We pretend we're doing
Mm.
something for real
Mm.
reasons, but rarely is it pure.
Yeah.
Um, what I have found the big battle line is between people. And where I, by the way, find your book, Hannah's Children, so refreshing because it's the
Mm,
same with the interviews with the women you have in it.
mm,
Then there are those people who seem to recognize the intrinsic worth of the thing they are
mm,
doing. So
mm.
I'll give you some non-children examples.
Yeah.
There are artists who paint or write scripts or make movies because they truly love the medium of film. They're
Mm,
not there to try to then get a better job or more
mm.
money or win an Oscar. They just are real filmmakers.
Yeah.
They love the intrinsic worth of that art form.
Right.
And you always know when you're in the hands of someone who does
Mm,
that. Um, and I think it's the same with relationships. And what I've learned over the years is this, and that is the value of the relationship is not what can I get out of it, or I can be a good enough parent so my kid goes to college and gets a great job, and then it
hmm.
reflects back on me
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
No.
It's what you talk about in the quote that I read from your
Yeah.
book. And
Yeah.
that is that this is the best thing I can do in the
Mm,
sense that this has intrinsic worth that's beyond the realm of question.
mm. Yeah.
So it's not about um, is this a step to something?
Mm,
And I think the saddest lives are where you see everything as a step to the next thing. You know,
mm,
your kids have to do well to reflect well on you. I'm going to college because then I'll get a great job.
hmm.
And of course, the people who get the most out of college are there because they love the subject they're
Yeah.
studying,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
The people who get the most out of a child are there because they understand the intrinsic worth of the experience of being passionately loved by a child in
Yeah.
the same way that, unquestioningly that Zip loves me.
Yeah.
Um, my relationship with Zip is not because I can get something out of him or Zip, whatever. It's because when I wake up in the middle of the night to pee a lot because I'm 73 and I have
Mm,
an enlarged prostate. Okay,
mm,
but Zip's always there to get me back, settle
mm,
down, sleep. And I disturb him. He gets up, he
mm,
waits for me to get back in bed, and then he nestles up right against
mm,
me
mm,
and doesn't sleep at my feet anymore. At that point, he puts his head on the pillow next to mine.
mm,
Zip comforts me.
mm.
Okay, so I feel a sense of warmth there that's beyond explanation.
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying this because I know I need another 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this because I feel like an angel from God has just landed on my pillow. This is
Yeah.
what love feels like.
Yeah.
It's He's not getting anything out of it. He'll get fed tomorrow whether he does this or not. But his reaction is just,
Right.
Zip understands the intrinsic value of love. A quick
Yeah.
lick to my cheek. He lies there. He waits
Yeah.
for me to start settling down. Then he resettles.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, one of the favorite things that happens in our house that doesn't sound like a big deal is I love to hug Jeannie. She's where I find I put my arms around her, I give her a really strong
Mm,
hug, and she always gives me this lovely sound.
mm,
Neither of us are going to make any more money or do better in our
mm.
career because of this
Right.
moment. And yet I can
Right.
honestly tell you
Yeah.
that that moment when she goes to me is a bigger
Mm,
I love you than
yeah.
anything she could say because
Yeah.
she's just enjoying being that close.
Yeah.
And it's not because it'll lead to a better relationship
Yeah.
or something. It's just the intrinsic worth. And I really feel that way about art and literature and teaching and learning and children and
Mm,
dogs and
mm-hmm.
life. Um, I don't look at the view of the marsh near my house as
Mm-hmm.
important because it increases the value of my property.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I've looked at this for 45, 50 years now, coming up
Yeah.
45, 50 years now. Um, the worth of a beautiful view or a close moment with someone or the love your dog shows you at 2 in the morning trying to get you back to sleep again is not because of something it leads to. So I think my story with the Gospel of Zip and my love
Mm,
story with Jeannie and my relationship to my children are precious to me because often in life we don't know what the intrinsic worth of something is.
yeah.
We're
Yeah.
wondering, well, how does this fit in? And
Yeah.
so as I get older, I treasure the stuff that is
Yeah.
so cleanly pure that this is just this. And
Yeah.
and it's a moment of joy for me. So
Yeah.
to me, that's where human relationships or a relationship with your dog or whatever it may
Yeah.
be, if you're in it for the intrinsic worth, you will get something out of it that's inestimable.
Right.
And it's beyond price, literally.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that you wrote, which is alone is bad and together is good. And this
Yeah.
kind of like in this deep sense of togetherness. When you're describing your dog, that Zip in the morning, like the head on the pillow and
Mm,
Jeannie's hug, and I couldn't help but think this is a lot of how toddlers and really young children
yeah,
instinctively relate to us.
yeah,
They just want that closeness, where it's like we didn't need the research, but of course the research is telling us that touching your baby, holding your
mhm,
baby, being skin to skin with your baby, like that's actually sort of feeding their soul in a way
yeah,
that we've tried to push that away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and of course that happens in so many areas of life where we
yeah.
push. And I find the same thing with a lot of young people who calculate about their romantic relationships as if
Yeah.
somehow they're choosing a corporate sponsor
Yeah.
or a partner,
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Right.
but it's not the good stuff in life doesn't come packaged in a utilitarian framework.
Yeah.
It's obviously of value in and of itself
Yeah.
without any other consideration. And in that
So,
sense, I really believe in passion.
yes.
I mean,
Yes.
whether it's passion for your child or your dog or
Yes.
your spouse, let
Yeah,
it
because
rip.
passion is bigger than just what we think of as the passion of two lovers,
Yeah,
right? There's a broader sense of it, and it's noble. And
yeah.
like as you say, it drives you to do all these great things and hard things for the sake of love. Um, when you're talking now, it reminds me a little bit. I sometimes hear because people ask me about why there aren't enough babies all the time. And
Sure.
one of the common kind of cranky things you get is, do we not have enough children because people have dogs instead?
Yeah.
And I always push back on this. I hate this question as if people have sort of replaced having children with dogs.
Mm-hmm.
If you're correct, then one of the ways we can advocate for children is also to advocate for more dogs and for
Yeah,
better
I
relationships
believe
with our
that.
dogs. What do you think? Yeah, tell me more.
Well, I totally
Yeah,
agree with you. I'm saddened
yeah,
by people who say, well, we're
yeah,
not going to have kids, but we have a dog because
yeah, yeah,
it's hard. I always feel like I'm someone who is so privileged that to give some advice is almost counterintuitive, as in, well, you're all set. You've got this woman that loves you and these beautiful children you take care of. But of course, that's not how it started. It
yeah,
started because
yes,
you did the work to get there,
yeah,
and
yeah,
with ups and downs and bumps in the road. But the fact of the matter is, I look at the privilege of being a father and grandfather as the only thing in my life that I'm absolutely certain about that I
yeah,
wouldn't change.
yeah.
I would just wish I'd learned some lessons sooner. So I feel like someone, who was raised in Switzerland in the Swiss Alps. I was in a very, very beautiful place, and I've been
Mm,
very fortunate. I live in a small northeastern town in Massachusetts, and I feel very fortunate. Um, when I visit places, for instance, when I lived in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I would drive the person who had been given to me by a company back to her house in Alexander
mm,
Township, which was to a hut and so forth, the sorrow I felt and the frustration at not being able to share more of my life other than just paying her more, which we did, of course, and helped her, was very powerful. So when I read about people who aren't having children, and the
yeah,
greatest pleasure of my life comes from my relationship with children, when
yeah,
I read about people who can't sustain a relationship, and the greatest pleasure of my life comes from hugging Jeannie, when you see a country bent on sort of a utilitarian version of life that's all about
mm,
consumerism and all the rest,
yeah,
my reaction is not horror. My
yeah,
reaction is sorrow
yes,
because I feel the same way when I visit third world countries and see a hungry child.
yeah,
It isn't like, oh, I'm condemning.
yes,
It's like, well, okay, I can share this sandwich and I can give some money to a charity, an organization that helps. But in the long run, as far as I'm concerned, to put it in old-fashioned Christian terms, this is sort of a mark of the fallen universe we live
yeah,
in.
yeah,
And it really makes me sad
yes,
because
yeah,
if everybody had told me when I was 17 and 18, don't bother getting married, it won't work out. In addition to which, why, who wants to be stuck with a child when you're a teenager, whatever it may be. If I'd taken
yeah,
any of that sort of advice that, certain aspects of the feminist movement give people,
yeah,
certain aspects of the manosphere, Andrew
yeah,
Tate, they're
yes,
very similar.
yeah,
And basically they deny the basics, what I have found to be the basics of a joyful life,
yeah,
and say there's other things to put ahead of that. And I find that terribly sad because if I took those aspects out of my life, um, I would have lost everything that I care about most.
Yeah. We have a special guest. I'm gonna have Queenie come visit if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
Queenie and well, she's gonna hand Queenie to me. She's afraid to visit my daughter. No, no, come on, come on. She'll be happier. Come
Hey,
say
well, you know
hello.
what? Queenie's
This is
portrait, her face, if
hmm
you take a look at my dog Zip, their heads are very much
They
the
I
same.
think his Zip has a bit of dachshund, right?
Oh, very much
A
so,
little,
about
yeah.
halfway.
Yeah, so Queenie is a dachshund,
Yes,
and
hello, Queenie.
we love Queenie very much. This is Valerie. Valerie
Hey,
is not a
Valerie, how
dachshund.
old are you? I don't know who everybody is. How
Let me
old are
see
you,
how old
Valerie?
you are.
13.
She's 13 years
Excellent.
old.
And how old is Queenie?
And we think Queenie is about 5 or 6.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm going to tell you how Queenie came into our life because it reminds me of you and of your book in so many ways. Queenie is the third dog in this household, and she is with us because she was the constant companion of a great man who was a professor, taught the Stoics and many other things. And he passed away
Mm,
about a year and a half ago from prostate cancer.
mm,
And Queenie lived with his with Michael until his passing away. And when you live with someone who's sick and he lived alone,
yeah,
um, Queenie actually gave up a lot of things. She couldn't go outside, so she
yeah.
stayed in the house with him. She lost her sense of house training.
Mm,
My son, in the last years of my last months of Michael's life, moved in with my 21-year-old son, 22-year-old son. It was like a Tuesdays with Maury situation.
yeah.
And Joe lived with Michael and helped out and got very fond of Queenie. And
Mm,
before Michael passed away, he said, uh, the one thing I'm asking you to do is take Queenie home with
yeah,
you. Take Queenie home.
yeah.
So Queenie went home with my son Joe, and we are fostering Queenie while Joe gets to a house where he can have a dog
I
again.
love that.
So this is a heroic dog who then Joe trained and helped her back to
Yeah,
her
because
normal glory. Yes.
that's a big loss for Queenie.
Yeah, it is. All right, we'll say goodbye to Queenie now. Say goodbye.
Well, hey,
Um,
listen, thank you for bringing
yeah.
her.
Yes,
I love how her head was on your daughter's
I
shoulder.
know. And she's similar. She sleeps under the covers and she sees all the problems. She's just a sweetie.
Well, it's such a
Um,
loss for a dog when they lose their person.
yes.
I mean, when
Yes.
we lose a dog, it's a horror show. But when a dog loses a person, there's a whole
Yes.
section in my book about
Yes, exactly.
losing a dog and what happened. And then the dog
Yes.
loses their person and the disorientation. So that's great
Yeah.
you've taken her in.
Yes. Yeah. So she's with us for maybe another month, and then she'll go back to my son Joe as he
That's
gets
great.
into a
Well,
house that can take.
yeah.
So,
Well, thank Joe for
she
taking care of
passes around. I will. But she's, just this. When I look at her, the marvel of someone who spent, I mean, someone,
it.
Queenie,
Yeah.
who spent years taking care of this sick man, and honestly, just a heroic story. So that's just an example. We really love Queenie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so when you were talking just now about loneliness, I was thinking you're reminding me of two Catholic saints who I love who
Mm,
talk about this. So
mm,
Mother Teresa, the late Mother Teresa, she used to say that the poverty in the first world, the poverty in the first world was much more severe than the poverty that she dealt with.
mm.
Because people would say, you're such a saint, you're picking people up off the ground. She said, well, this is a need, and it's what I'm called to do. But
Yeah.
she would say, go home and love your family because the loneliness in the first world
Mm,
it's a greater poverty
yeah.
than and because it's the loneliness of the soul. Um, and that always struck me really deeply.
Mm,
And I think this is what you're getting at, that actually like the worst fate is not sickness, it's not death. It's the worst fate would be to do any of those things alone.
mm,
And the other saint is John Paul II, who I grew up a fan of.
mm,
And in one of his sort of philosophical works before he became a pope,
mm,
he wrote that his understanding of like the most fundamental human need was to not be alone. And
mm.
he said that we're born into the world with a kind of existential loneliness. It's a kind of
Yeah.
crisis of loneliness. And that all of the things that relate to the flourishing of ourselves as persons have to do with overcoming this existential
Yeah.
loneliness. And of course, he says that the family is where we are sort of most
Where it
deeply
happens.
called to do this.
Yeah.
So you're a philosopher in a lot of ways, and I think your work really speaks to those two saints
Mm,
who I admire for different reasons.
Well, last time
Um,
I was in Rome, I went to John Paul's, well, I guess you call it his tomb, but
yeah,
unlike he's one of the few popes who's actually in St. Peter's that has a
yeah,
place you can
yes.
venerate him. And I love that. In fact, I did a little video from that spot and put
Hmm.
it on my
I'll
channels
have to
and
check
just
it
said,
out.
I'm standing here.
Yeah,
And of course,
yeah,
Mother Teresa is someone who's I'm familiar
yes,
with and also venerate. But
yeah,
um, of course, John Paul II was a great opponent of the communist regime of the Soviet
yes,
Union and
yeah,
basically freed Poland, him and Lech Wałęsa and a bunch of other
yeah.
people. Margaret Thatcher, Donald Trump was not
Mhm.
around in those days.
No.
So fortunately, we were not currying favor with Soviet leaders the way he does with Putin these days.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really admired about John Paul was
Mm,
that his opposition to authoritarian totalitarian
mm,
regimes was because they destroy the capacity for human joy of
mm.
relationships by trying to
Yeah,
order society in a way that makes everyone a creature of the state.
yeah,
And
yeah,
his opposition to communism was not an
yeah.
economic opposition, it was a
Right,
humane opposition.
right. The
So,
subjectivity of the person is,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
destroyed.
And
Yeah,
and just what we were talking about before, he was someone that
yeah,
believed in the intrinsic worth of family,
yeah,
not as an organ of the state that then makes you productive, blah blah blah
right.
blah, but because in itself this was something good that needed no justification. I
Yeah.
think the difference between a utilitarian view of life in general, or
Mm,
pets, or
yeah,
dogs, or
yeah,
children, and a good view, a proper view that I would say is this difference between understanding the intrinsic worth of those things. And the way I would put it
mm,
is that art, love,
mm,
childcare, family, these things, whatever you want to put in there,
yeah,
need no justification.
mm,
Art
yeah,
doesn't have to be about philosophy to be worth,
right.
or politics.
Mm,
Family doesn't have to make you productive.
right.
Um, Beauty is not there so you can build a hotel and sell rooms to
Yeah,
look at it.
yeah,
And I just think that that's been lost. And I'm glad you
yeah,
bring up John Paul, because
yeah,
John Paul believed in the intrinsic worth and the intrinsic
yeah,
value of humanity and human
right.
beings and human
He did.
experience. And I do too.
Yeah, 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 he did. He was a great
Yeah.
proponent. I had a kind of adult conversion experience at Auschwitz, but in Poland,
Mm.
visiting Krakow, the place that he spent much of his life, and
Yeah.
I was deeply moved as a young person by his opposition to communism.
Hmm.
Um, I'm wondering if you think, you know, going if you think that particular attack on the subjectivity of the person in these totalitarian regimes is one of the reasons family is faltering so much now in the former Soviet countries.
Yeah, it is. And the funny thing is,
Yeah.
we've done our best to replicate that here
Yeah.
with our smartphones and our
Yeah.
oligarchs,
Right.
billionaire,
Yeah.
trillionaires, who are
Yes.
literally profiting off of taking the
Yeah.
attention span of our children and driving
Yeah.
them into the ground,
Yeah.
and then directing them through algorithms to things that they first
Right.
find entertaining and
Yeah.
later keep you always on track to listen to and only be exposed to people who drive your own biases even further into
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I really feel, and this is a different subject, but I actually get
Yeah.
into it a little bit in the book, and by inference a lot. And again, it's to do with the intrinsic worth. When you look at these
Yeah.
billionaires who have muscled their way into the American fabric of our lives, to me, this is a malign influence.
Yeah.
And one of the ways it's malign is separating children from their parents.
Yeah.
It is separating young people from young people. So
Yeah.
when Jean Twenge, who I interviewed about
Mm.
her book, 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World, when Jean was on my show a few weeks ago, we were talking about the effect of social media. And of course, one of the ways she researches this in what she calls the iGeners, which is Generation Z, is the fact that these are people who are not even forming relationships, even in casual dates,
Yeah.
because they are living in these isolation chambers.
Right.
So, we've got a problem on our hands. And what I
Yeah.
talk about in my book, The Gospel of Zip, is very much to do with this. But I think, again, it starts when you begin to value things like the economy or the gross national product or the
Mm.
Communist Party
Mm-hmm.
or any ideology over and
Mm-hmm.
above the value of the individual human experience of each other.
Right.
And the
Right.
genius of a guy like John Paul was that, okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's a Roman Catholic Pope. But ahead of that, he believed in the intrinsic worth of beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. He
And I think
did.
that's the big division. Do you believe in beauty? I
Yeah.
believe in beauty.
Yeah. He was an outdoorsman and used
He
to hike a
was.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Um, well, I've got a couple more thoughts or a couple more questions for you.
Yeah, please.
The first, I was just thinking now you're talking about Jane Twangy's work, I'm a huge fan. She's just wise and like writing about all the important things.
Yeah.
Um, you're a grandfather. You are actively engaged in raising your grandchildren,
Yes.
which I think is extremely unusual. We have this weird idea today that, when you retire and become a grandparent, you should move away from where life is happening and like
Yeah.
live on a golf course and never see your grandchildren. Um, I think that's just bonkers. It's a huge piece of what's wrong. A lot of the complaining that takes place today, which is
Mm.
justified about the way that retirees aren't passing their homes down to their children. I think this
Yeah.
would be solved if we just thought we should live together or live
Yeah.
next door to
Yeah.
each other, right? So tell us a little bit about how you interact with your grandchildren, the how often you see them. I mean, I think
Yeah.
this is very interesting for people.
Well, my two oldest grandchildren
Yeah.
spent the first part of their childhoods in Finland because my
Mm,
daughter married a Finnish American and moved there. And then we would
okay.
visit and they would come here. And I probably saw them for a month a year
Okay.
out of every year, either visiting there or having them here. Now they've all moved to the States and they're very close geographically
Mm,
to me. So now I see my grown grandchildren quite often and have since they were in their late teens. My three youngest grandchildren were literally living in my house
mm,
because after my son John got out of the U.S. Marine Corps after he fought in Afghanistan, he was honorably discharged in 2005,
mm,
and then he went to the University of Chicago and got
mm,
married while he was in school. Came back here, and they had their first child almost immediately. And she's now 17 and graduating from high school. Well, she was born while they were living in my house, and so
mm,
looking at the room here, I used to walk around carrying her in my arm here, and I always said you can get tennis elbowed by holding a toddler in one position. But I scored a lot of points with her mom. But I found that, just speaking from my point of view, my years of doing small child care fell at a fortunate time for Jeannie and I because I
mm,
wasn't traveling a lot speaking at the
mm,
time. And
mm.
Jeannie and I really split the work. So it wasn't like, well, this was something my wife does and I'm around the edges.
Yeah.
I did a great deal of childcare from building a play park in my yard where they've got swings and climbing frames, but also more than that, walking around while they napped in my arms, taking them out to see things. I talk about this in the book. I love to cook. I cook them meals. We don't go out much. I do most of the cooking in our home. Um, but I have found that relationship with my kids was intense. But my relationship with my grandchildren is different because it's incredibly intentional.
Mm,
Like I already know what's
yeah.
valuable in life as I look back on my
Yeah.
children's lives, but my relationship with my grandchildren is totally different.
Yeah.
It's not like something I like to do or whatever. I know
Mm,
what I know now. And it's different being in your 70s and when you're in your 30s and 20s and
yeah.
40s. I actually know some things now. And one thing I know is what I enjoy most.
Mm,
And what I enjoy most is taking care of my grandchildren, period.
mm, mm.
So it's not always easy,
Yeah.
but it's incredible. So that, when my daughter-in-law, Becky, asked me to drive because Lucy has a headache and wants to come home from school early,
Mm,
they never ask as if it's an imposition because she knows that I feel like a horse that's just been let out of its stable. At last, one of my grandchildren needs me again. I'm
mm,
I'm there. I'm gone. I'm already in the
yeah.
car. This is the best part of the day because
Yeah.
my reward for having always been there
Mm,
for these grandchildren is that the 45-minute drive home, I will get
mm,
she will tell me everything she's been doing that day. And I will get a text from her saying, Ba, I haven't seen you this week. Can I come to lunch on Sunday?
mm, mm.
This is a 17-year-old teenager
Yeah.
who hasn't seen me all week because now she's in high school and I haven't had to pick her up in the week. And guess what? She texts me and says, I haven't seen you all week. I want to come over and see you. And
Mm,
will you make me lunch?
mm.
To me, this is like getting this is like getting an Oscar. This is a
Yeah.
prize
Yeah.
because it isn't that I'm getting a prize for doing some work that I didn't enjoy, but now they're growing, I'm enjoying them. I
Yeah.
really, really loved the process.
Right.
Um, I love being the person, the go-to person. I love being the person they count on in their lives. I can't imagine doing anything to forego that
Yeah.
as somehow more important. And my problem is the exact opposite. It's everything else I feel pales by comparison
Hmm.
to the point that, why am I bothering doing any of this other stuff? This, what I really want to do is this. So I find every excuse to go down to their school. If there's an event, if there's anything, I'm there. And then during the week, if there's any driving to be done. But when they were little, I literally babysit them. They've never had
Mm.
any other babysitter except Jeannie and me. They've never been
Wow.
in daycare. They've never done any of that
Mm.
because, we would never have wanted to miss that.
Yeah.
So in the same way you write in your book about having children and you interview these
Yeah.
mothers,
Yeah.
I read their interviews in your book, Hannah's Children, and I relate more to those women, if I can put it
Yeah.
this way,
Yeah.
than I do to most of my friends because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, they get it.
Right.
I wouldn't have to explain what the core, the molten core
Yeah.
of my
Yeah.
world is
Yeah.
the love for and the love received from those children.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I'm looking here, everything around me is little playthings they've made and pictures they've done and all the rest of it.
I love that. I want a poster or a t-shirt that says the molten core of everything that I've done.
Yeah,
It's hard. I'm such a big fan. And when you talk about Zip, when you talk about the dogs and you talk about the kids, I
yeah,
want to get a little teary-eyed. So maybe there's a little schlocky on both sides here.
yeah.
But are you optimistic that we can we can spread this gospel? Are you optimistic that people can take this up? In a sense, when you're so right that most people, young men and young women, are kind of on a utilitarian pursuit. They've
Hmm.
been coached from their earliest ages. I mean, this is one of
Yeah,
the things as an educator I hate most about, or the system, if you will. They
yeah,
arrive in my classroom and they are unprepared for me to say, look, in fact, I don't want to grade you. There's no prize here.
yeah,
It's just us in this room. We're going to turn off all the phones. We're going to have a conversation, and
mm,
there's no prize to be gained. Like, I'm going to enjoy you,
yeah,
and you're going to enjoy me. And you've waited your whole life to be in my classroom, and I've waited my whole life to meet you.
mm,
And this is so disarming for them.
yeah,
But I feel like I do have to push against, 18 or 19 years of their being coached into thinking of life as a race or like prizes
yeah.
to be gained. Are you optimistic that we can talk about this maybe contemplative mode of enjoying each other, contemplating each other, and we can sell this to people who are maybe exhausted, maybe anxious, maybe lonely. How do you feel right now today? Are you optimistic we can spread this gospel?
I am in a sort of a weird
Mm,
backhanded way.
yeah.
And that is the very fact that the people who are so lonely are so unhappy
Mm,
and all the way up to, suicide and all the rest of this goes to show that we were actually built to be something different.
yeah.
I mean, if this was working
Mm,
well, if
mm,
everybody who wasn't having relationships or children was wildly happy in everything they were doing,
mm,
if they weren't all on antidepressants and trying to make connections, when you interview Gen Z people, the first thing they'll tell you is they think that they have been somehow sandbagged by their social media. They hate
mm-hmm,
it, but they're stuck. They're stuck.
yeah.
So it's like
Mm,
talking to an alcoholic who,
uh, mm,
is wondering whether to go to an AA meeting. They're not happy as an alcoholic. When you're in trouble is when you
yeah.
think this is all working well. So my
Mm,
optimism comes from the fact that I think there is something called human nature.
mm,
And I use a word that is now out of fashion with so many people for so many reasons, but I
yeah.
think there is something called normal.
Hmm.
And normal for a human being is to need the help of others, receive it, and be grateful for it. That's
Mm,
normal.
yeah.
Normal is to receive love and to make that warm your heart and to be. What is abnormal is having 14 children with six different women and having in vitro fertilization so you can check the IQ of the baby
Yeah.
and all the stuff these tech bros are doing that they're
Yeah.
they're trying to make the new normal. And so, It's as
I
if they saw
know.
all the science fiction movies like Gattaca or Brave New World or Animal Farm, and they thought, oh, yeah, that's what we ought to
S-
do.
Sign
I
me
mean,
up, right?
excuse me, Orwell and Huxley, all these people, they were warning
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
This was not, these were stop signs.
They were not utopias, they were dystopias.
No, this is the whole reason they wrote this
Yeah.
book. They said, don't do this.
Yeah.
Because they came out
Yeah.
of the 1920s and 30s when the fascists tried all this and it kind
Yeah.
of, whatever. So I'm optimistic in the sense that I really believe human nature will win.
Mm.
And I trust human nature. And so we're
Yeah.
going to go through some ruined generations and a lot of people who are going to be left by the wayside and their lives empty, destroyed, ruined, wasted.
Yeah.
But there are also people who are responding to your message
Yeah.
that you've got in your book, Hannah's Children. Hopefully, we'll respond to the Gospel of Zip.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll listen to Brad Wilcox when he
Yeah.
writes his book, Get Married.
Yeah.
Hopefully, listen to people who, like Gene Twenge and these
Yeah.
others who do the science work and say, look, here are the graphs. Here's how it charts. If you're
Yeah.
alone, this is how it all works. There's a lot of that out there. And we're fighting a gargantuan battle because on the one hand, left is right, right is left, everything's flipped, family values, our president does not represent the family values that I have. And
No.
he calls himself conservative. If this is
Right.
conservatism, then what am I?
I know.
And on the
Right.
other hand, where do we find our place? But I think where we can all agree on something is that if we can take the truth we find in the tenderness of the moments of connection we have in our lives
Mm.
with Zip, with your daughter, with my
Yeah.
children, with my grandchildren. I'm not saying this for the sake of this interview here, but like I'm cooking for my grandchildren again tonight, chicken, rice,
Yeah.
and gravy. Why? Because their mom and dad are stuck at work stuff. So who do they call? They call me. I'm doing this podcast with you right now. So
Yeah.
Jeannie's going to drive down and pick up the
Mm.
three grandchildren at high school because they're
Yeah.
all in high school now. She will bring them back here. I
Yeah.
already roasted a chicken that is sitting in the
Mm.
kitchen with the gravy ready to go.
Wow.
Um, I'll put the rice cooker on as soon as we're done here. I
Yeah.
will take them their chicken, rice, and gravy and broccoli because I
Mhm.
always cook things they really like to eat,
Yeah.
but that are good for them. And now I got the chicken out of the freezer this morning when I woke up early. I get up very early. So I was up at
Yeah.
4 o'clock and defrosted. I cooked it. I had that. That was as much part of my day as
Mm.
talking to you is here,
Right. Right.
because this isn't like, oh, this is something I do when I have time.
Yeah.
I built my day around roasting
Yes.
that chicken.
Yeah.
And weird as this sounds, that's as important to me as this
Yeah.
conversation because I'm now, my grandchildren will get food from our house and a ride from their grandmother. I'll do the cooking. I'll take the food up.
Yeah.
That is the guts of my life.
Yeah.
And it's not like some special weird thing. It's to me like, it's where I live. And so that, people get older, they wonder if they're, what did their lives, did it have meaning, whatever. Okay.
Yes.
When Becky texts me in the morning at 5 o'clock, because she knows I'm already up early, saying, can you help us today? To me, it is a gift in the sense that I don't have to ask myself, why am I
Mm.
here?
Mm.
Like I'm here, I'm needed.
Yeah.
I'm 73. I'm at the age when you become trash. You're not
Yeah.
needed anymore.
Mm.
You're not the hot, sexy new thing. You don't have, so
Yeah.
forth and so on. I mean, there's a whole
Yeah.
ageist thing going on. Oh no, this young couple, my daughter-in-law and her husband,
Yeah.
depend on Jeannie and I.
Yeah.
Not only do we know we're needed, it's a relationship with this family that means that when they need something, they call me,
Yeah.
they call Jeannie. And so that roast chicken is basically, an
Yeah.
anti-Alzheimer's pill because it's like I am engaged, I am awake, I am needed.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a
100%.
big deal, but
Yeah.
my life stripped of that would be stripped of meaning.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I think we've talked about this. Our days are off. I think you and our days are very similar.
Yeah.
Monday I devoted to making a special chili, and worked all of my work commitments around this special chili.
Yeah.
the chilies are from New Mexico, and the beef is organic, and it's a long process,
Yeah.
but it feeds my family for 2 days, and
Yeah.
it's not less important to me. It's not something that just. Here's a funny story about John Paul II.
Mm.
I remember reading this at some point that when he became Pope, he said, "All right, where's the swimming pool?" And they said, "Well, like, Your Holiness, there's not a swimming pool." He said, "All right, well, we're building a swimming pool." And the point was sort of like there are things that are kind of as important as
Yeah.
poping, whatever poping
Yeah.
it
Whatever that
requires,
is.
swimming. But I joked to my friend, I said, if I were ever president or pope or anything like
Mhm.
that, which is absurd, the first thing I would ask is, where's the kitchen?
Yeah, exactly. Me
Because
too.
yeah,
Same.
right, exactly. Where's the
Yeah.
kitchen? And I want the kitchen to be right next to where my desk is,
Yeah.
because feeding people, whether it's my
Hmm.
children, my grandchildren, my students, my
Yeah.
guests, my friends, is as much a part of my maybe my intellectual project or my work
Yeah.
as anything else. So that's a deep, I think it's a deep orientation to the soul, which I think you and I share, and
Very
it's
much
something
so.
that's so admirable. Before we wrap up,
Mm.
from the sublime to the ridiculous,
Mm.
you've published this book in a slightly different way
I did.
from some of your other work. Do you want to tell us about that?
Well,
And
you asked me earlier, what do I hope young men get out of this? And the
yeah,
one thing is, here's the book. Okay, so you can get it on Amazon, but if you look at the
yeah,
thing, it's divided into these very short sections. Can you
yeah,
see the numbers?
yes, yes,
Well, I said I'm going to write there won't be chapters, there will be sections. It'll be
yeah,
like text length
yeah,
because I'm trying to get to people who don't read.
yeah,
It isn't dumbed down. It's
no,
written in the same way I
yeah,
write everything, but I put it in short sections. The other thing I've done is a friend of a friend who used to produce the McNeil Lehrer NewsHour
mm,
back in the day, and then made some of the Nova programs, happened to be up here and agreed to come over to my house and turn my living room into like a little movie set. And I
hmm.
recorded the whole book for 4 days with him, with
Wow,
Bob, directing me. He's a really good director of spoken
hmm.
word, and having been a news director, working with a non-professional.
Right,
So then I put the whole thing on YouTube for free,
mm,
no strings attached, nothing, because you and I both write, but we know if we tell the truth to our
yeah,
agent and publishers, to you, that the reading public is diminishing.
yeah,
People who
yes,
sit down and read a book, and younger people aren't doing that as much as they used to.
right,
And I really, if I may say this, have a
mm,
missionary burden to reach
mm,
out to younger people in the
yeah,
language in which they operate, which is not buying a book. It's
hmm,
getting something for nothing on
yeah,
YouTube. Like when you're
yeah,
going to, you like to bake, I like to cook.
yeah,
So if you have a question, you just say, how long do I roast a turkey for? And there's 50
yeah,
YouTube videos. This is how people learn things these days.
yeah,
So
yeah,
basically, I put the whole book, the Gospel of Zip is all on YouTube for free.
hmm,
And I also then I had to self-publish because publishers don't do things for free.
yeah,
So my agent
yeah,
and my former publishers are not thrilled with me right now. And I put it on, it's also on Amazon in both book form and Kindle for people who want to buy a book, of which I hope there are a few people who will do that.
hmm,
But um, it's in the first 10 days it's been out there for free. It's had about 2,300 views, which is good
that's
for
great.
an 8-hour book.
Yeah,
And I'm hoping that a lot of people who wouldn't normally crack a book get a bit of it, get
yeah,
interested. And the audience I'm really aiming for is younger men and women
yeah,
who have given up on what I consider to be the essentials of life, which is
yeah,
relationships, love, procreation, children, grandchildren.
right,
This is the stuff of life.
yeah,
It's not career,
yeah,
it's not money. And
yeah,
and so basically, I've just told my story, but I've told it with a sense of, really trying
yeah,
to change some minds.
yeah,
And I've had that happen a few times in my life, and I'd like a lot more of it with this book,
yeah,
in the sense that I know you have too. I've
yeah,
talked to a younger person, and 10 years later, you get a Christmas card with a picture of them and their 3 kids saying, if I
right,
hadn't talked to you, we never would have gotten married. And it's like,
right,
okay, tick the box. And I'd like to see more of that
yeah,
from people just chasing careers and all this other stuff, who maybe take a deep breath and say, well, maybe there's something else to life. And here's one love story that tells that
yeah,
story. So
right,
I put it out there for nothing.
yeah,
Um, not
that's,
as, because I really want to
yeah,
change some minds.
right. So people can find it on Amazon, but
Yep.
they
Watch it
can
all for free. I got
find
an,
it, watch it listen to it, share it on
Yes.
YouTube.
And if they like to read, like I say, there's the book,
Yeah.
and it's got all the footnotes in the back and a bibliography, including your work, et cetera,
Hmm.
et cetera. And I'm hoping that there are some fellow travelers like you who
Yeah.
will tell people who know about them,
Yes.
just as I tell people all the time about your book, Hannah's
Yes.
Children. And I mentioned it on my podcast when you're not involved, and I'm talking with Brad
Yeah.
Wilcox or anything else. I
Yeah.
say, as Catherine
Yeah.
Pakaluk says, I do that all the time. But I do it because it's part of the same
Yes.
impulse. I'm
Right.
trying to promote your book because I
Yeah.
want people to discover what you've been saying.
Yeah. That's right. Well, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah,
I mean, I think we're working on a similar valence, right?
yeah,
And um, so I'm really quite passionate about it. As you know, I read the an earlier draft of this book cover to cover on a single airplane ride cross country.
yeah.
Enjoyed every page. I laughed. I cried. It just it reaches the heights and it covers the daily life and little itty bitty things and big sublime meaning of life things.
Mm,
It's such a beautiful, I think, as I said before, a distillation of like the pure Frank and what you've become over all of these years, and because of these people in your life, Zip, Jeannie, and your children, your grandchildren. I really loved it. I can't recommend it enough. And I'm really honored to be maybe your first interview.
mm.
So I hope everybody listening, I hope everybody who will listen in the future will hasten to listen to that first trailer, that first teaser,
Yeah.
and enjoy this as much as I did.
Well, one of these times when you have some of your students gathered,
Yes,
get me to come down and talk with them
I will. We
because I
absolutely
I
will.
want to I love what you're doing, and I can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
The kitchen is more important than any
Yeah.
ballroom, whether new or old.
Yes.
And the gospelofzip.com has all the links if people want to go there and find them to the book and everything
Wonderful.
else.
Yeah, I assume this video will have links and notes as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And
And I want
so
to thank you again for reading the early draft and the good
yeah.
notes you gave me, and for writing Hannah's Children, because
Yeah.
I've been able to quote that and
Yes.
hail friend well met.
Yes, yes. And now it's my responsibility to get up to your neck of the woods soon, and I will do that soon.
I've been trying to get you to
I know,
visit us for about 20 years.
not for
No.
lack of an invitation
Yeah.
yeah, but
And hey, one thing without saying, you had one of your children there with you. You know that if you ever show up with a
with
crew
the ch
of kids
a
or a
few
dog,
children.
Zip will get on with that
Yes.
with children. They're always welcome. I'm being serious. It's never
Yes.
like, oh, well, I couldn't bring the kids. No, of course
Yeah.
I would love to have you and the kids too.
Yes. Well, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic we'll get up there. Maybe not in the prettiest time of year, maybe midwinter at
Doesn't
this
have to
point.
be pretty. It's always nice.
Yes, of
The
course.
kitchen's always
The
fine.
kitchen is always warm. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll cook for you.
that's right. Amen to that. Thanks, Frank.
Hey, it's thank you for me.
Yeah,
Really, just this is such a gift. Thanks for taking the time.
absolutely. It
Okay.
was really a pleasure.